Hello, everyone. Welcome to WGSN-DB Going Solo Network Radio and our new streaming network.com, home of Going Bold and Going Solo TV. We want to thank you so much for joining us here tonight. You are going to be on the show, Date the Right One, and I am your host, Cece Shatz. I'm fondly called the Doyenne of Relationship Building, and I am so happy to be here with you tonight. We're going to have a lot of fun because we're going to talk about dating, right? Those of you out there that are in the land of dating, it can be troublemaking for us. It can be hard. But we have a guest tonight that's going to tell us how to do it and why we attract the wrong person into our lives. And we wonder about that from time to time. We think to ourselves, are we doing this the right way or the wrong way? Well, we're going to find that out tonight. We have Andrea with us. Andrea is a life partner. She's a life partner magnet coach. She's a transformational expert, and she guides women, and I believe she would guide men too, if you're interested, to attract the perfect partner in their life. And her clients really, what it says, her clients dissolve interblocks to love and know their strengths. And truly, that's what it's all about, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
Well, welcome to the show. We are so pleased to have you here tonight. So tell us a little bit about yourself. Tell us about how you got into helping those that are really struggling with dating and and making that transformation in their lives. Tell us how you started in this type of work.
Sure. I started in this work mostly because I came from a background of over 20 years in the healing arts. And I came upon this method when I had the problem of being single. I was single for 14 years, and I couldn't figure out why I couldn't find someone who was really compatible with me. And it made no sense to me. I mean, how could it take so long? And I had a come to Jesus day where I just had this insight. I could see myself at 80 years old and still single. And I thought, okay, it can't be. I mean, there's so many men in the world. It's got to be me. It's got to be me. And so I embarked on this inner work because I had that aha moment. It was really making that decision that I was going to do something different. And in the process of getting my inner work done, I learned about this method. And the method, I thought, why not use this method with other people? And being from the healing arts, I was already familiar with working with people. And I knew what it was like to have your life not go the way you wanted it to go in so many different areas. And in this particular area, it's really life affirming. I came from a place of being a kid who cared so much about wellness and, like I believed that we could take care of ourselves if we had the right kind of medicine. I just knew it, like deep in my soul. And so, what's more important than having a loving person in your life? I think that's a sign of health. And so it comes from health that I got here.
Well, we're glad that you did. I tell you, a lot of people do struggle with dating, and a lot of it is that transition that we make from maybe a relationship loss of some sort, whether it be by divorce or by death. And so then we kind of take that with us, as we travel through. And then we move to the other side thinking, we do want to have someone in our lives. And so when I was reading your website, and I want to put it up because I really do think that people should check out her website. Her website is Mind Changes, that's plural changes, CHANGES, life.com, mindchangeslife.com. What I was reading about you, it was with regards to like your subconscious, right? And understanding yourself through your subconscious, realizing that some of the blocks that you have, you don't realize sometimes you have them, do you?
No, that's the thing about subconscious is it's below your level of consciousness. So the only clues that you have a subconscious that's not lining up with your goals in life is that you're not reaching your goals. And you, even though you don't know why, it's makes sense to look underneath to see what are the beliefs that I really hold that I'm not aware of. You're familiar with people who the whole process of, trying to change a habit. And so you force yourself to change a habit by doing, or you do affirmation, and you do get results, but it takes a long time. And there are methods of changing your subconscious that don't take so long. But the title we came up with of, what is it? The wrong, why we attract the wrong men. Yeah.
And how to
So,
change.
yeah. So I thought, well, who are the wrong men? And what I found when I've talked to women, a lot of times it's no man. that's wrong too. So whether it's you keep finding that you're attracting somebody who's a narcissist over and over, or you keep attracting someone who's not over something from the past part of their life, or you keep attracting someone who just doesn't seem to be able to love like on a level that you need love. It's time to look inside. And the reason you keep attracting that same kind of person is that that's what your subconscious is set up for. And although that's, the bad news is you don't know where it's coming from. But the good news is you can change it. So we can talk about that later.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I've often said that it's somewhat patterns, right? And we realize that when we're out there dating, if we're finding the same thing over and over again, it's truly a pattern that we've kind of established. And maybe it's because we're kind of comfortable with that, right? We're comfortable with the same person that we're seeing over and over again. We're used to it. And so
So true. It's like, even though on a practical level, it makes no sense because it's not quote unquote good to have somebody who's, say, a narcissist, but there's a comfort level on a subconscious level. Oh, I know how to deal with this. This is what I'm set up for because I've had a life of patterns of doing this. And I have an analogy if you'd like to hear it.
Yes, I'd love to.
Okay. So the analogy is that we as humans are like a two-way radio. And, a radio has a whole range of frequencies to it. And, if a new radio station comes out, you don't have to go to the store and buy a new radio. You just change the tuner to a different station. So as a human, we have a huge broad spectrum of ways of being that we could be. However, because of how we were raised and growing up and reacting to things in life, we've gotten these grooves in certain channels. And those are the channels we're kind of stuck in. And we're both stuck in terms of what we project out into the world. So like what energy I'm sending out. And then we're also stuck in what we're able to receive or willing to or open to taking in. Does that make sense?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. I mean, sometimes I guess maybe we have to change a channel.
Well, I can give an example. Like I used to, when I was doing, when I was single, I've started doing this work, started unearthing what it was that was in the way. And that wasn't just one thing. There was more than one. But one of them was I was sending out a signal of don't bug me, like a stop sign.
Right.
And it was something from being a teenager, or it was really old, but, I didn't notice I was doing it. But on some subconscious level, I was sending it out, and then people were receiving it on a subconscious level. So they didn't know why they weren't interested in me, but they were feeling it or sensing it on some subconscious level and turning the other way or doing something else. It's so sad because we don't have to be stuck.
Right. Yeah, it's really how we project ourselves, I think, too, is very, very important. And so, if we want to create that shift, right, we have to start to understand the patterns that we have in our lives, what it is that we do want. And they always, my friends always say, well, you better be careful for what you want, right? What you really want, because you might get it. And
Yeah.
so, and that is really true, is that you really truly have to know what is good for you and what isn't good for you, and how you're able to move forward in it. So
Yeah.
tell us a little bit about attraction. Often we talk so much about like the attraction factor, right? If you have that chemistry, you don't have that chemistry. So
Mm.
in our subconscious, is that what is like the motivation, or the way of that we handle this attraction?
That's such a great question, because I'm going to talk about attraction in two different ways. So I think what you bring up is partially related to, I'm going to say, okay, when you're in your 20s,
Mhm,
there's hormonal stuff going on,
mhm,
right? And it's almost like your biology wants to be in a relationship, and there is nothing stopping it sometimes, And when we're older and we're wiser and you have a lot of experience in life, that level of attraction is not the same. I'm not saying it's gone, but it's not the same. And I think we think too much. I can't tell you how many times I've talked to women and they have this list of things that are, not acceptable, which is fine. However, I think to attract, there has to be an openness.
mhm.
Does that make sense? Like
Yeah.
I feel like for instance, my partner and I happily did find someone, obviously. That's why I'm in this career. Um, if we had filled out a dating site thing, I don't think we would have found each other, because we aren't, we don't fit these little um what you want looking for things. But when we met, there was an openness to, I don't know, yeah, feeling each other's energy, allowing them to feel your energy. I think there is that's the kind of attraction I'm talking about. I talk about it being a magnet. Like, what are you drawing to yourself? And
Mhm.
yes, making that list, knowing what you want, is really important. And unfortunately, your subconscious doesn't always line up with what you say you want. If you don't believe that you deserve the best that love and life has to offer, you might not be able to take it in.
Right. That is very good. That is very true. The reality is that we have to ask ourselves, would we date ourselves, right?
That's
Would
such a
are we
great
the kind of
idea.
person, are we kind of person that would, because I mean, if we're putting ourselves out there, are we doing all that we can, to, we make these lists about all this negative stuff. And I think if you do that, the negative comes to you, right? When you put all this out there, this is what I don't want, then that's going to surely come to you. But if we center ourselves into what it is that we do want, that we truly believe that we can achieve that. Of course, that's our subconscious probably talking. And then, make ourselves a factor of that. I don't know how I can word it without being too, but, we need to look in the mirror, and not about necessarily about the way we look, but would we date ourselves? Is what we have worthy of someone else, and worthy of love from someone else? And, ask ourselves those hard questions. And if there's hesitation, then we need to maybe get a coach to help us, try to sort some of those things out. Because, like you said, they're buried deep within our subconscious, and we need to understand it more. Don't you think?
Yeah, I think so. I think there was at the very beginning, you said something that made me think about the subconscious and um, how tuned in you can be to Oh, I know. You were talking about all the negative things. Unfortunately, the subconscious doesn't really hear negative. It only hears positive. So
Mhm.
when we reprogram our subconscious, we say what it is that we are and who we want to, and who we really want ourselves to be. And like you said, if you look in the mirror and you're really honest with yourself, you might, come up with a different way of looking at how ready you are. So when I was looking, I thought I was ready the whole time. I thought I was ready, and like, how come nothing was showing up? And
Yeah.
sometimes we're not ready. And you asked before about, or you mentioned before, that people come out of experiences of loss and divorce and things. And I had the double whammy. I was in the process of getting divorced, and my husband passed away suddenly from a heart condition while, before we actually did it. So it was like boom, boom, I got
Mhm.
both. And that's a lot to get over.
Yeah.
And I didn't acknowledge that. I just thought I was fine.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, that's a tremendous thing to get over, because it's not only suffering the loss of, the demise of the relationship, but then, the individual themselves, you still kind of expect them to be there around or whatever.
Well, he
Um,
was the person on the planet that knew me. I mean, there's nobody on the planet that knew me like he knew me.
mhm,
And then he's gone. It's like it's just astounding. Even though we were not doing well as a couple,
mhm.
you have 25 years with someone, there's a lot there.
Yeah, yeah. And then also we have to, in your particular circumstance, then you have to come to terms with, that we're, that our end could be near. I mean, we think about it more and more as we get older. How close are we? How many more years do we have? That kind
Well,
of
I
thing.
was I was
Yeah.
actually pretty young when he died, so I think for me it was more my kids. Oh my gosh, my kids thought, I could disappear just like that,
Yeah.
because why wouldn't they think that? I mean, it just happened, you know.
Right. Right.
So, and actually that's there's so many different things that can be in the way of really being ready for a relationship, and one of them is not being done with parenting. There's some part of ourselves that's so wrapped up in that it's hard to be right at the right place at the right time when you've got that emotional responsibility.
Hmm. Yeah. So, with all that equation, right, with all of that we're talking about, it
Mhm.
really is, a lot to take on when you're starting to date, when you're out there and dating. So there's a lot of moving elements. I mean, I think there's a lot of things that we have to think about as we're progressing and we're moving forward into dating. If anyone out there, I know those that are listening, if you have any questions or comments, please feel free to go ahead and write them up. We'd be more than happy to answer any questions or any comments that you might have. If you're watching the show after we aired live, go ahead and write your comments and questions, because we still go back and look at them, and we would love to definitely hear from you. I think what we're going to do is take a quick break, but when we come back, Andrea, let's talk a little bit about, how can we change it, right? Now, we
Yeah.
talked a little bit about, why we attract the wrong person in our lives. And we talked about the patterns, we talked about our subconscious, we talked about various different things like that come into our lives. Maybe, our wish list is far too long, who knows? But now, how do we change it, right? How do we switch? How do we make that shift in our lives to be able to start attracting the right person into our lives? And most of all, when we start to attract, I'm going to do a double question for you. So when we come back, we're going to talk about it. So not only how do we change it, but how do we know when we have? Because so
Mhm.
often we maybe meet the right one, and we're so into that, self sabotage, that we don't actually see it. So I think this is very important. So we're going to take our quick break. We're going to come back 30 seconds. So if you guys have to grab a drink or something, do that now. But we're going to talk about how to change it. So why we attract the wrong, I'm going to say person, and how do we change it? So we're going to be right back. But before we do, I want to make sure you have Andrea's information. You can reach her at Andrea, that's Andrea, at mindchangeslife.com. And our website again is Mind Changes Life. That's MIND, changes, CHANGES, life, life.com. You want to check out her website because she's got great information on there. If you want a little bit more information about what is it called? The psych. Is it
Psych K is what
Yeah.
that's the
Yeah,
method that I use to help people.
okay. Which we probably talk a little bit later when we come back. But if you want to
Mhm.
know more information about it, there's a little button there. You just click it and you can find a little bit more information out, and you can contact her directly and she'll help you with it. So make sure you check out mindchangeslife.com. Of course, you know me, I'm Cece Shatz. I am fondly called the Doyenne of Relationship Building, and you can reach me at goingsolonetwork@gmail.com, goingsolonetwork@gmail.com. And we'll be right back, everyone. Hang tight. Hello, welcome back to Date the Right One. You guys are listening to WGSN-DB Going Solo Network Radio and newsstreamingnetwork.com, home of Going Solo and Going Bold TV. We want to thank you so much for being with us. Of course, you guys know we are a TV, radio, and a podcast station, so all of our wonderful shows are right there. We are the #1 internet singles talk network, so I want to thank all of you out there for making us that, and we do appreciate it. Tonight we have our wonderful guests. We're talking to Andrea. We're talking about why we attract the wrong, I'm going to say, person and how to change it. We talked the first part of the show. If you missed it, you got to go back and listen to it because I think it was important. We talked a little bit about our subconscious. We talked a little bit about patterns in our lives. We talked about some of the things that we've experienced and how we kind of take that through. But now what we're going to talk about, we're going to talk about how to change it. And then also that big, big question about, will we know when we do find the right one? So, Andrea, help us a little bit more with this. You are a life partner magnet coach, a transformational expert, and you really guide individuals how to, mainly over 50. I want to tell you that her clientele tends to be over 50 to attract their perfect partner. So let's talk a little bit more about this subject, Andrea.
Okay. So we talked about the subconscious. We didn't mention what the neuroscientists say, which is that 95% of your beliefs and your actions are actually coming from your subconscious. I mean, we feel like we consciously do things, but you know that those times when you've driven home from somewhere and you don't really remember making any decision to turn anywhere, that's kind of like life. You know, there's just a lot going on subconsciously and our reactions and our perceptions and beliefs and patterns all come from there. So that's why it's so important. And like I said, the good news is we can do something about it. You've probably heard of the term rewiring your brain. Have you ever heard that term, Cece?
Yeah, I have.
Yeah. So there are so many different techniques. I use this method called Psych K, PSYCH-K. K is for the key because it's the key to making substantive changes. And you can go to psychk.com, psych-k.com if you want to read about it. But there are many different modalities. There's hypnosis, there's meditation, there's emotional freedom technique, which is called EFT. There's EMDR, which is some therapists use, neurofeedback. And I would have to include homeopathy. Homeopathy is a way of having good health, but really it also helps on a subconscious level. Probably not something people are aware of. So the process involves, like you said, Cece, people are aware that they want something different, or they kind of know that there's maybe people told me I was self-sabotaging. Of course, I couldn't see it. So somebody else had to tell me that. And in the process of talking with somebody who's knowledgeable in one of these modalities, you can start to unearth what it is that you really want your subconscious to believe.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's these methods where you're able to, and it's sounds almost magical, but it's really very practical to just go in there and have that sort of the kind of basic change which really will help you believe in yourself in a different way, so that you're out in the world and really loving yourself in a way that, because no one can I mean, that there's that old adage you have to love yourself before anyone else will love you.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know, don't you think that's true?
Yeah, it's funny because I was talking to someone the other day and we were talking about love, right? And I said, "So what is love to you?" And he said to me that he felt that loving someone else, when you're in love with someone else, it's like loving yourself. And I
Oh,
said, "Well, what do you mean by that?" And he said, "Well, you have to love yourself. If you truly, truly love yourself and then you fall in love with someone else, you'll know it because you know what it feels like to be in
to
love with."
love. Oh
Yeah.
my God, that is so beautiful.
And I thought,
I'm going
whoa.
to use that. I'm totally going to use that.
But I thought, whoa,
Wow.
check this out. That was pretty deep. And I was amazed by that because no one's ever said that to me before. And often when we ask individuals, well, how do you know you're in love? Oh, they just kind of know it. They just kind of feel it. They just kind of know it. But again, it has to be your subconscious feeling that way, that you've connected somehow. And I'm sure there's a lot of, it's like it's to me, it's like a switchboard, right? And you've got all these circuits you're plugging in, right? And
Yeah.
when they all kind of pretty much most of them plug in, not all of them are going to be plugged in, then you kind of have that. So yeah, so I was very touched by that. I thought that was an amazing response. But yeah.
Yeah. And what it touches on is really, have you experienced love? Because I have actually been noticing that one of the challenges that a lot of people have is they don't feel like they've really had love before. And what you said is so true. They and I guess the step that they've taken in the process of doing inner work is now they are feeling love for themselves.
Mm-hmm.
And then like you said, translate that into being able to feel it from the outside now. It's like I can give love because I know what love is.
Right.
And because I know what love is, I can actually feel that someone is being loving. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah,
Mhm.
absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. And we talk a lot about, how one treats us, all of these different elements as we're moving through dating, as we're transitioning into this feeling. And yeah, so it equates to that. It's like, some of the things like would you accept that particular behavior, you know, if you're thinking about yourself from a loving standpoint, would you accept this behavior that that this individual is portraying to you? And that's a good gauge on whether that's good or not, you know?
So what you mean is like, would you accept it from yourself to
Right,
yourself? Yeah,
right.
that makes a lot of sense.
Right.
Yeah.
And so when you see this, because we get a lot of people coming through, my environment that have been, mistreated and things like that as time has gone on. And so you have to ask yourself, would you treat yourself like that? Would you treat other people like that? Is that, and so when you coming from a place of love, that's when you can draw the line and say, no, this relationship isn't really what the one I'm looking for.
Well,
And
and the person who's had those experiences really, with working in these different modalities that I mentioned, it's an opportunity for a person to really, what's the best word? To be able to have harmony inside themselves, given that they've had that situation, that they've had the trauma, that they've had the disappointments, that they've had you name it, it's like, it's what happened. You can't undo what happened. And yet you have to build a new framework to come from so that you're not the person that's going to happen to again.
right.
Does that make sense?
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, and so as you're moving through relationships and you're establishing things, I want to ask you, when we had a conversation a long time ago about love, like different types of love, and there are different types of love, isn't there?
Yeah. So tell me more what you mean.
Well, of course, in my life, I can just only use myself as an example. In my life, I've had various different loves, right? I have a love of my family, love of my children, love of my friends. I love my friends tremendously, and different people in my life, I love them differently, right? Um, but the person that you want as a partner is a total different kind of love, right? And it's a more, I don't even know. I wanted to say solid came to mind, but I don't know if that's the right word for it. So can we kind of describe that kind of love? Maybe security or
Hmm.
solid. What would you say?
I would actually say it might be a little unique to each person.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think what happens is in different stages of our life, we either need or we're only ready for a certain kind of love.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe a certain kind of love is what fits more into what we're up to. When we have kids, oh my gosh, it's just, it's unconditional. I mean, you can't not be unconditional, right? And
Right.
really, we'd like to have unconditional love with our partners too. I think that's what maybe distinguishes it from like the kind of love that like the other kinds of love that you come across in life. Is that helpful?
Yeah, yeah, I think it is. I mean, I think it's the depth, right? Is what I'm thinking. Is that when and that's why, I brought it up because I wanted to also talk about how would you know when it's the right one, that you
Yeah. So
have that.
I actually have a way of doing that, but I don't know if I share my secrets.
Well, no, no, don't share all
This
your secrets.
this
We
is
don't want
exciting.
that.
No, it is really cool.
Mhm,
So two things I want to say. One is, as far as my understanding of relationship with a new partner, when when you're starting from, as they said in that TV show the other day, it's not like you're um, uh, it was an example where it's like you're a merger instead of a new company. You're not a startup like you were in
mhm,
your first marriage.
right.
This is a merger, which I love
I
that.
love that. I love that. This
I
is just
love
a
it.
merger.
It was on a TV show the other day. Anyway, so what I was going to say is you don't really know the person completely when you get started.
Yeah,
And
you're learning.
so one
Yeah.
of the things we did is we used the 36 questions from the New York Times. There's this 36 question thing. And you each answer a question and you take turns who answers first and you work through them. And, you just don't love each other the way you're going to love each other in 3 years right away. I mean, it just takes time. I think and I think it is partly because we're older. It isn't like, um, that kind of, I don't know. It's not the hormonal thing.
Yeah, yeah, it's not that. It's the depth, right? It's the depth of
And
how we feel, and
but
that
I
grows.
think
That's the thing.
it
Yeah.
does. The depth comes with time, I think. But I think the capacity of that other person to go in depth, you can probably tell. mean, that might be something. So here's the thing I can share. And I was going to save this for a future episode, but I'm happy to share it.
And we can talk about it again on another episode.
Yeah. So there's five things you can look at. I mean, there's the superficial things like, do you both want to live in the same part of the world? Do you, is one of you still raising kids and the other one really doesn't want to deal with that anymore? Are you, one wants to travel all the time, the other one doesn't. I mean, those are superficial things that they don't line up. You might not want to be together. But once you get past all that stuff, you look at 5 areas of your life and you rate how that person would affect how you feel about that area of your life if you're with them. So the 5 areas are physical, emotional, spiritual. Did I say social? Social and intellectual. Okay. So intellectual, social, physical, spiritual, and emotional. So it isn't whether or not they have the right physical attribute or whether or not they have the right intellect. It's how would your intellectual life be if they were your partner?
Right.
And you rate them each 1 to 5. And then, you look, I mean, if one of them, they all have to be 3 or above.
I'm sorry, they all have to be what?
They all have to be 3 or above out of 5.
3 or above. Okay.
Because if it's a 2, I just don't know if it's going to be good.
Well,
I mean,
it would depend on how long you've known each other too now. I mean,
but it kind of can tell, like in social, like, is this person going to be fun in a social life with me? Or is it just going to be weird because they say weird things or their attitude is just not quite, it's off, like I don't really feel comfortable around my friends with this person. Then it's not going to be good.
Yeah. That's why I always say we should go through seasons, right? Through all the seasons, through all this, like a year, you go through everything to see how all of that is handled and done,
Yeah. I've also heard people say 3 months, 6 months, a year. Have you ever heard that? Like you go through 3 months and then if that, if you're still feeling good about it, then you go to 6. And then if you're still, and then you go to a year. I don't know. We were pretty clear after a few months, but we met right before COVID. So, yeah, I don't know.
Well, COVID made us think of things differently. It really, I think it made us home in on what was truly important, because a lot of times we let a lot of stuff get in the way. And so I think COVID really made us think seriously about things. So, yeah.
What do you mean about that? Like, I can imagine what you mean, but I'm not sure.
Well, yeah, I mean, a lot of times when we, like you said, somebody will have a long list of, okay, I have a good friend, and he said he doesn't want to date anybody that has, unless they're a brunette. And I said, hey, you can go to the drugstore and get a bottle. I mean, and now at our age, most women are not brunettes because they're gray. So I mean,
it would be fascinating to really go in and say, what is it about brunette? I mean,
yeah,
you would learn so much about yourself if you actually faced the things you say.
Yeah, I haven't been able to talk to him more about that, but I have to get down to the bottom of it. But I thought it was interesting. But what I meant about COVID is, like, I don't think we would worry in times of COVID. We would think more about, can we be tracked with that person, and for months on end. Could we live through that versus like what color their hair was? But and back in that time, people weren't even able to color their hair, so the reality really set in.
It just made it so hard to meet too. And there was so much discomfort and distance. And, I mean, how could you get close? I mean, threat of death, it was not a fun time.
No, it was not a fun time. It wasn't fun. But, if you met your partner during that time and and you guys got to know each other, then, that's great. That's wonderful that that happened for you. Absolutely wonderful.
Yeah.
Well, gosh, our show has really gone, pretty fast. And I know we've got so much more to talk about. So I would love to have you come back on again so we could talk a little bit more. But tonight we talked about why we attract the wrong person and how to change it. And then we threw in a little bit about, how you would know. And of course, I think we probably need to this topic needs to go a little bit more in depth and talk about it a little bit more because, when we're talking about two individuals with two different personalities, two different histories, coming together, it can be very exciting, and it can also be very daunting, the dating. So we want to be able to help you here on Date the Right One. So any closing words that you'd like to say, Andrea, with our audience?
Yeah, there's two things I want to say. One is I want to encourage people to make a decision. I think that's so key. You're not going to, make a decision that you want something, and if you're willing to, and a decision to change. And also, if you're interested in if you do go to my website, there is a button on every page that says free consult. Just there's a button you push and you answer some questions, and you can actually even schedule it. And I'm happy to do a free consult to see if this kind of work could really be a fit for you.
That would be great. Thank you for that. I do appreciate it. So again, her website is mindchangeslife.com. That's mind, M-I-N-D. It changes, CHANGES, life.com. And make sure that you do that. You can reach out to her at Andrea at mindchangeslife.com. All of the information again is in our show notes. We always put it right there for you. So if you come back later on and you want to, find it, it's definitely there for you. But really give this some thought. If we often think about, why are we attracting these individuals into our life and why it's not working out. And then we want to throw in the towel. We want to say, give up on dating. We want to blame the dating sites. We want to, do all of this. But the reality is, it's really up to you, right? It's your choice how you want to move through dating and how you want things to come and the end result. And so sometimes we have to dig deep, look in the mirror, look at ourselves, and maybe make some changes in our lives, in the way we look at things, and think about our subconscious, which Andrea is very, very abreast of this. So it's something you definitely want to talk to her about. She is a life partner magnet coach. She's a transformational expert, and she really guides individuals who are over 50. And she kind of specializes in that because that's a tough time when you're over 50 and you're looking for a perfect partner. And so she helps the people with that. So if you guys find yourself in that situation, give her a call. Go on her website and hit that button, do a free consult, and talk to her about maybe some of the things you're having. And then you can decide on, what's good for you and what isn't good for you. So we want you to be happy and content and, be with the right person. And we hope that you will do that. So you guys are listening to Date the Right One. I am Cece Shatz. I'm your host here tonight. I'm fondly called the Doyenne of Relationship Building. And I want to thank everyone for being here. If you want to reach me, just go to goingsolonetwork@gmail.com. I read all my emails myself. No one answers them but me, and I will send you a message back. I love to hear from you. So we hope that you enjoyed the show. Please make a comment, subscribe. If you would, please subscribe to our YouTube channel. It really does help us. And, just hit that like button so we know that you guys are listening and that you enjoy it. We want to thank you so much for being with us. You're listening to WGSN-DB Going Solo Network Radio on the new streaming network.com, home of Going Solo and Going Bold. We want to thank you for joining us tonight. Bye for now.